When Lindsey and I submitted the abstract for this talk, it was months ago, and we pulled it up again a couple weeks ago when we were planning for this, and we saw that we wrote that we weren't going to deliver, we said not another boring roadmap presentation. And I looked at Lindsey and I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to be interesting now, we can't be boring. So hopefully we're going to live up to that promise, and I think a great way to do that is that we're going to talk about you as customers and talk about what we've learned. So I think we have a combined four and a half-ish years so far at Puppet Labs. And in that time, we've managed to talk to quite a few of you, hear from quite a few of you, talk to the folks internally that talk the most to you on professional services and customer support. And we've learned a ton about our customers. And we're going to use kind of what we've learned about what you want and what your problems are to give kind of a new view of the Puppet Enterprise roadmap and show you what's coming in the next couple of releases, and then show you kind of a longer-term view of what we're planning out and how we're going to provide solutions to your problems over the next 12 or 18 months. So how many of you in the audience are current Puppet Enterprise customers? If you could raise your hands. Okay, so that's a pretty decent majority, I guess. Oh, wait, keep them up, keep them up. So keep your hands up if you bought Puppet Enterprise primarily for support and services. Okay, so most of you kept your hands up, and that's actually really great and totally expected. So historically, all along the way, support and services have always been this really key part of the value that you get with PE. And especially, you know, in the enterprise, you're trying to onboard a lot of new users. These users have questions, so support is there for you to answer those questions. You've got mission-critical infrastructure and applications, so you need somebody to call and yell at 24/7. And support is always there. They're there to take your questions and there to try to troubleshoot and help you. But the truth is that as we've developed kind of along the way and gotten to know you better and better as customers, and we've learned much more about the goals that you have as enterprises, and probably even more importantly, we've learned a lot about the constraints that you operate under, or I hesitate to call them problems, they're more like the realities that you face working in enterprises, especially in larger enterprises. And in order to help you achieve those goals while kind of dealing with and mitigating those realities, we've got to go way beyond support in the product. So what you've seen us do, certainly in the time that we've been at Puppet Labs, is really build more and more solutions to your problems into the products themselves. And it's really those goals and constraints that are informing the Puppet Enterprise roadmap also as we go forward. So you talk to us quite a lot about DevOps, and that's really, I believe that's why we're all here at some level. We all want to bring Dev and Ops together and solve the business problems and get that velocity for the business. And everybody wants to operate just like a Google or a Netflix. We all look up to these companies, and it is so exciting. You know, we have companies like that on our customer list. And I'm so overjoyed by how successful some of these companies are. And, you know, or a lot of our customers are getting really, really darn close to that kind of shining DevOps ideal. And the focus on these most successful, famous companies, I think, is really inspiring. But the truth of the matter is I think it can also be pretty discouraging to a lot of like the mere mortals among us, because we're dealing with a lot of problems in our companies. And it's really hard to live up to this kind of DevOps standard. I just met with a customer talking, one of the questions that was asked of this customer is, you know, are you implementing DevOps? And she just kind of started laughing and talking about how many dozens of teams they have that don't really talk to one another. But on the other hand, you know, no one can really afford to go back to the world of unmanaged scripts. Things are just moving way too fast for that. And so I feel like regardless of what we call it, whether we talk about DevOps or whatever it is, you need automation solutions right now. And you need these solutions that work within those constraints so they really are adapted and tuned to the special conditions within your companies. So what are these goals and constraints that I keep mentioning? Let me start with the goals. So the first one is speed, and this one is pretty obvious that I just mentioned DevOps, so I'm probably kind of repeating myself, that you know, you really want to help the business go faster. But I think in talking to all of these enterprise customers, what we see is that you kind of have a unique spin on it because you're really coming from a place where you were historically seen as impediments to speed and impediments to the business. And Puppet Enterprise is really about turning this around 180 degrees so that you're really a key enabler. Instead of an impediment, you're a key enabler of speed and a key enabler for the business. So it's not, no more months to provision a new server. We're going to empower you. We do empower you to deliver infrastructure and platforms to your devs as soon as they need it, and you'll see stuff like self-service on our roadmap. You need to deliver really fast to keep your customers from going elsewhere. And so we've talked a lot about, shadow IT and keeping, developers from going out to AWS and getting their own infrastructure and bypassing you. I think it's important, though, that you have multiple different types of customers. So it's not just developer teams, but it's also external customers. You want to keep them from going to your competitors because, they will, if they can get features and functionality, they can get what they want from a competitor more quickly. Then you also have a goal, and I think it's kind of the other side of the coin from speed, is the goal of control. You need to retain control even while you're moving at top speed, and control can often really get in the way of speed. I mean, that's part of the reason why it takes so long to provision a server in so many of these organizations and configure a server. So infrastructure as code and what Puppet Enterprise offers, it's really all about establishing control with the velocity of automation. And I can even say it's a form of control that actually enables you to go faster. So it doesn't put those things in opposition anymore. Instead, it really ensures you can enforce the changes you want when you need them and fix the changes that you don't need. So we all know about that remediation capability. And, of course, version control. So infrastructure as code, you manage in your version control system. And that means that you can roll back. You don't have people making changes you don't want. And so a lot of the things that you'll see on our roadmap that are around either reporting, ways that you can enhance remediation and using no-op, and also code management, so enhancing your use of version control, and role-based access control, the list goes on, are things that are really helping you achieve that goal of control, but without slowing you down. So I also talked about constraints and realities and how important these are. I think they're actually equally important to helping you achieve those goals, is kind of understanding how you work. And you still have silos and separation of duties. And so, I mentioned that about the sort of DevOps ideal and, people sort of winking at each other sometimes, because I just had lunch with a customer a couple days ago, and they were telling me that they actually, I have to look at the number, they have 97 app teams, and each one has a custom tool chain. And they're trying to go in and get all of these folks to start working in similar ways and in more consistent ways. And so, with Puppet Enterprise, we're not going to assume, so we don't assume off the get-go that you're all working on a single team. But what we are going to do and are doing to date is building product that's going to help you maximize your efficiency and uniformity across teams. So you can still have separate teams. We hope that you're not totally siloed. We want you to communicate with each other. And we're going to provide tools that enhance that collaboration, enhance the velocity. But if you have separation of duties, we're going to help you enforce that as well. So regulation, major constraint. I know a lot of you are operating in pretty heavily regulated environments. Actually, most of our enterprise customers. I mean, you've got SOCs or PCIs. We've got government entities dealing with STIGs and HIPAA, and all of these different sort of an alphabet soup of regulation that affects your infrastructure. And it impacts the way that you can work. So customers tell us they don't have access to the internet for most of their machines or all their machines. They have dozens and dozens of firewalls. So a lot of that, we have to think about that when we offer you things. So how are you going to download? How are you going to access this? And then another aspect of that is, of course, reporting. So we give you tools today to help you show compliance to your auditors, prove compliance, and understand when you're out of compliance and remediate it. And we're going to be enhancing those into the future. How about no spare time? Well, you all are some of the busiest people in technology or pretty much anywhere. And product managers, we're pretty busy too, so we absolutely get that. We can definitely relate. And we have a lot of customers that are really passionate about Puppet, and so even with their limited time, they're going to spend their spare time on it. They're writing modules on their weekends. They're really like contributing to the Forge. They're doing pull requests on Puppet. And that's great, but we know that, and this is actually as we move more and more into sort of more traditional enterprises, we see a lot of customers that still, they love PE and they're excited about it, but it's a tool. And it's a tool that they actually love because it lets them go home at 5 o'clock and spend time with their families, or maybe 6 o'clock. And so we're working to make PE easier to deploy, quicker to get your work done. We want the investment of your time to go down so that the value of what you're getting for that time investment increases. And it doesn't, either way, if you're going to spend that free time that you gain working on Puppet, or if you're going to spend it with your family, whatever you do, we want you to have more of it. We want things to be faster and easier for you and see real time to value really quickly. Scale. So scale is not totally unique to, it's certainly not unique to a traditional enterprise, but the pattern of what we're seeing has changed quite a bit over the past couple years, where we originally saw a lot of our Puppet Enterprise customers, we saw a lot of you adopt at pretty small scale, maybe in a single department, so maybe you had 50 or 100 nodes, and a lot of our customers, newer customers especially, still do that. But we're also seeing customers that have so much success at that limited scale that their management takes notice and that they start getting interested in really scaling out. And as they scale out across many departments, like I think hopefully you guys got to catch Walmart this morning, so they're scaling out to thousands and thousands of nodes.
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands of nodes, excuse me. Yes, tens of thousands of nodes, right. That was part of his point. They're global. They're in 12 data centers all across the globe. They need stuff like resiliency, high availability. So they need features that weren't as important to that 50-node customer. And just as important, they need insight from. They're collecting masses and masses of data now, and so they need insight into the data that comes from those thousands and thousands of servers. And so in Puppet Enterprise, we're about letting you really leverage the advantage that you get from scale, so it doesn't become like a burden and a problem for you, but it can actually be a competitive advantage. And then finally, the last point on the constraints side is heterogeneity. So if you were going to form a company last year or last week, you'd probably have a single app built on Rails. You might put it in AWS. It's probably going to be on a really consistent single platform with a pretty consistent and uniform configuration. And let me tell you that none of our enterprise customers, almost none of them actually look like that. You all grew organically. So what we hear is, you had established your first data center 20 years ago, and you maybe have a financial app that's a legacy app that's running on a few mainframes. You might have AIX running over here. Oh, and you acquired a company last year, and they're running everything on Windows, so now you have to figure out how to manage Windows. But you don't want to get left behind, so you also have a greenfield project or a POC that you're running in AWS, so you need support for that as well. And by the way, one of your dev teams over there is experimenting with containers. And what you really need is a single tool that's going to help you consistently manage all of this heterogeneity, so you really have just a mass of different platforms. So really get your arms around it, really manage it, consolidate that information and data from all these different aspects of your infrastructure, and start reducing the number of snowflakes that you're seeing. So start getting much more consistent about managing, even with all of the heterogeneity that you can't really get yourselves out of. Okay, so now that I've covered some goals and some constraints you're operating under, Lindsey's going to come up and he's going to talk more about solutions and how the things that you have seen recently and are going to see over the next 12 to 18 months are really informed by those different categories. So he's going to kind of show you the roadmap in this view.
Thanks.
Sure.
So if you imagine what Susannah just told you is one leg of a stool, and what Deepak told you this morning, and what Ryan and Luke and others told you yesterday, this is sort of the third leg of the stool. Like you got some technical roadmap this morning. You got some. We're reflecting back what we see to you and the goals and constraints. And I'm going to talk about kind of thematically the things that we want to provide for you. So towards helping you achieve speed, there's so much friction everywhere around you. You're completely surrounded. This is how things end up taking 6 months. We're just constantly looking, where are the points of friction? Where can we remove them? And we think of the node lifecycle as sort of this, we always draw it in this sort of left to right way. You know, you need a server, the server's provisioned, it gets told what its purpose in life is. Puppet probably makes it into that thing. It runs. Maybe you remediate drift, and it lasts for a little while or whatever, and then it dies, and it needs to be reaped. That's what we consider the node lifecycle. So we're looking all along that chain, those workflows, looking for points of friction that we can help reduce or eliminate. So kind of on the provisioning side, we have Razor for bare metal provisioning. We have new infrastructure as code tools for Amazon Web Services, vSphere, Azure, and more. These are the places where we most frequently hear you talk about. You still have metal. If you're thinking about cloud, it's probably AWS or Azure, and you have your, as Luke said, you renamed your vSphere environment to private cloud.
Right.
And none of that's going away. So we're looking for ways to smooth that part, that early stage of the life cycle. Code management is about getting the right code to the right servers at the right time in a very efficient way. I gave a talk on that subject yesterday in this room, and we have a lot going on right there. There's nothing I can add about application orchestration that an hour or more of Ryan and Luke and everybody else talking about it. So it's a huge thing for us. It's a major step forward, and it just opens up an entirely new area that we can solve problems. And a lot of this stuff is in the service of, I didn't mean to say it that way, in the service of providing self-service, which is a huge driver. We hear this over and over and over again. I need to be able to get stacks to my developers very quickly. And there's, application orchestration is just one important facet of it. Where and how you provision machines, how you turn them into what they need to be. A lot of that adds up to being able to provide infrastructure as a service to your consumers. And the last point is a little different. It's not what you think of as PaaS. Like if someone says PaaS to me, I think I'm going to go write Ruby on Rails, and I don't have to worry about the servers that it runs on top of. And that's nice. That's interesting. But in an enterprise environment, it's like, this is going to be great for you. You don't have to worry about infrastructure anymore. All you have to do is throw away every bit of code you've ever written and rewrite it in a particular style of Ruby on Rails, and then everything will be fine. It's a total non-starter. So when I say Puppet as a PaaS, I mean you'll get to the point where things like Apache, or the Apache module has nearly 1 million downloads. The Elasticsearch module has 200,000 downloads. I mean, for most use cases, Puppet is sufficient to provide a really high-quality Apache, Elasticsearch, Postgres, you name it. These things are there. If you're in a heavily Puppetized environment, if someone comes to you and says, we need a Redis server, we want to bring Redis into our application, or we're building this new thing and we're going to back it with Redis instead of Oracle or whatever, you can just, oh, great, here it is. And now all you need to do is go configure the data, tweak the data to whatever you guys need. And that's it. So you are creating a sort of consistent platform. You get less snowflakiness. You get less people who've never used Redis before trying to jam it into production, after they hacked on it for the weekend. There's all these things that can keep future fires from happening if you have that sort of like central control, and you can begin to provide these major components as a service. And then, of course, with application orchestration, you can start to wire them up together. Control over when change happens. Deepak touched on these things. This is sort of in the context of direct Puppet about you can make change happen immediately. You can queue up a bunch of change and have it happen during your change control window. You have a lot more control and visibility over when things happen, and confirmation that the thing that you wanted to happen actually did happen. This version code and data artifact is about having like a single point. Like right now, I can go, like your developers have been doing this forever. They use something like Artifactory. They build a whole package of their application. It probably runs through their continuous integration, and they know that I've got a signed binary, and I can go deploy it. I can keep it for the next 6 months. If I need to go back to that version, that binary is still there. I want to bring that same kind of capability to Puppet, where you have like an artifact that you can move around and store and make use of and recreate later if you have to. Change promotion workflows, a huge thing. Your developers have been doing this forever. In that past, you might have been editing config files on a production machine, and Puppet takes you pretty far away from that. And we want to more easily bake in those sort of promotion processes. Like, well, I try something on my machine, it appears to work. We're going to run it through some tests. It's going to be promoted into just our development environment. We'll go to a QA environment. We get it staged, and then we push it into production. That there's an easy way for your sysadmins to promote those things through that sort of workflow without, which should really greatly reduce the chance that production deployments fail because you've tested it so much in the downstream environments. Finally, compliance is such a huge deal in the enterprise, and there's just a lot in there. So actually, testing, in my mind at least, testing has two benefits. You get the benefit that, like, this does what we want it to do, and it didn't break something that we knew couldn't be changed a year ago. And our deploys are much likely to succeed because we've tested these things well. There's also the sort of like compliance and policy benefits as well. And actually, Nate Loomis, who spoke yesterday morning from Wells Fargo, this is what they do. Somebody orders, they have the same self-service thing. Developer hits the button, it provisions some machines. Puppet knows what to turn them into, Puppet does that, and then a security scan is run against every VM. Any VM that fails is immediately reaped. Which has several notable benefits. A, they got the security team on board with the solution. The developers have assurance that they have compliant hardware, and that if anything does fail, they know somebody screwed something up and they're non-compliant or they're out of policy. So, like, instant feedback, and it's always security tested. And then finally, the reporting side, understanding, are things in the state that they should be? You've got your Puppet code, you've got your runs, you can work with your audits to make sure that you can provide the right visibility into how things were, how things are right now. Kind of a defining factor of the enterprise that there's just a lot of people and a lot of teams and people you don't know, people in far-flung time zones, people that came on board from acquisitions, and it could just be really confusing. So delegation is a huge focus for us coming up. It's just generally, how can you give people targeted capabilities where they have a very small box that they're in, and they can do the thing that they need to do, but they can't break everybody else's stuff. So part of that is really flexible, more flexible data management, so that it's kind of easier to set all that stuff up. Taking auditable action from your workstation. Actually, when Ryan demoed application management this morning, he was doing this. We didn't really talk about it at the time, but Ryan was doing those things he was triggering all that action from his laptop in his own name. And so in a log file somewhere, there's at 9:47, Ryan Coleman deployed something Forge. In the past, a lot of this is, I'm going to SSH into a server, I'm going to escalate to root, and then I'm going to do something, which drives your security people bonkers, and frankly, they're right. And then you have all this action, root did this, root did this, root did this, root did this. That's useless. So we want to give you tools you can run from your workstation so you don't have to log into servers. It's done in your name. It's done with your personal, the things that you've been, the capabilities that have been delegated to you. And a lot of these things end up to what I call self-service configuration management. There's a lot of friction involved in, okay, Puppet code, right in person. Your Puppet code is great, but we need to change JVM heap size. So I'm going to write a ticket, and the ticket comes in, and you just need to change this one value, and oh my God, this takes forever. You should just be able to let your DBAs manage DBA configuration and let your app teams manage their configuration. But you have to be able to do it safely. And what if they don't know Puppet? Then that's fine too. So you give them a UI, and you can go in, and there's only 4 parameters, and you're the DBA, so you know what these values should be. And you can go in and do it, make your change, get in, get out, and then they take care of themselves more rapidly, and they consume less of the Puppet kind of core team's time, because you have no spare time. Generally, we want it to be really obvious how to be successful with PE, and that's opinionated workflows. Maybe you've seen some of this shown off over the last few days, is the application and node graph visualization, so you can kind of easily figure out the kind of relationships with things. A Puppet SDK is sort of a just add laptop getting up and running with actually writing Puppet code. So it's all the tooling around that, testing, pre-made code snippets, things like that. Just kind of a collection that you would give to a person to get themselves set up with kind of the whole thing that they would need. The installer updates and scale out is about getting the right PE infrastructure, either getting installed for the first time, staying up to date with more recent releases, and then scale out is, wow, we went from managing 500 servers to 5,000 servers. What do we do? Well, you just go and classify 5 more boxes, give them the compile master, and then Puppet just does that for you. So scaling out your master installation is dead simple. It's very fast, it's very easy, and it's very safe because Puppet does it for you. And then, the last point is just kind of a no-brainer. Just we have a massive community. There's so much great content out there that just comes from the community. There's the Puppet supported program, which are largely modules that are written by us that you can get support for. There's the more recent approved module program where we identify high-quality community contributors. And the goal is write less Puppet code, and if you are writing Puppet code, make sure it's something that's unique to you, and help you find good choices. I was talking to somebody this morning about they were like, well, how do we do this in Puppet? And really their problem was, how do we run 5 different modules with the same name at once, because we want to figure out which one of the 5 we like the best. Like, we want that not to be a very big problem. We want it to be pretty obvious. Like, you should pick this one and you should run with it. More is better. The chart here is a graph of scalability and performance improvements over the last several releases. That's like Puppet 2.0 and to the end of the 3 series, and then our most recent release, the 2015.2. We've invested really, really heavily in this over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's really, really paying off. And yet we want and need to continue to push it higher and higher. So looking ahead, like Deepak talked about, some of the direct Puppet stuff is about making the Puppet master work smarter so that it doesn't do as much work as it needs to. Making catalog compilations that it need not do. We've been adding in operational monitoring tools. A lot of the services have these endpoints. Just what is the health and wellness of this whole thing? Do I need to add more resources? How is PuppyDB doing? High availability is a humongous priority for us right now. If a customer comes to us and says, I've got 200 whole machines I need to manage, that's not a lot, really. And yet, they demand that they make that infrastructure highly available. 200, 2,000, 20,000, everybody needs these things to be highly available because they are so, so important to like the daily functioning of your business, and very bad things happen if Puppet's not available. And another kind of aspect of scale is geodiversity. It's a little bit different than I've just got a bunch of servers. There are different things you might want to know when you've got these 7 data centers around the world or whatever. And we want to build some sort of like a pane of glass that gives you those few things that you need when you've got a lot of servers here, there, and everywhere. And heterogeneity, again, if you are a startup, you probably have a Ruby on Rails app. Maybe it runs on a PaaS. That's just not the reality in the enterprise. So we continue to invest, especially Windows. We've invested heavily in Windows. There's been a bunch of great talks from here. Earlier today, I watched one of the talks with one of the inventors of PowerShell and one of our Windows engineers. It's a huge focus for us. We have a fully staffed team. We continue to invest very heavily in that, and we recently announced like DSC integration. So much going on there, and we continue to invest in the other things that are perhaps a little less cool, but your Solarises, your AIXs, and there's a lot of other stuff that tends to have an unexpectedly long lifespan in enterprise that we want to bring some of those Puppet management capabilities to. Kind of unlike the cloud side, again, you've probably got VMware, you're probably doing something in some public cloud. We're going to continue to make those things easier for you to make, whatever transitions you want to make into those environments. We want to make that easy. And I mentioned this before, the AWS and Azure and vSphere provisioning. We also have a Razor for provisioning Metal. The containerized future. The promise of containers is that they're so fast to throw anything in a container, but the downside is it's so fast you can throw anything in a container and you have no idea what's going on, what's inside of that. So I think the story is really going to unfold over the next, pick a number of months or years, but we kind of want to be part of how can you sensibly make use of this technology. There are benefits that I think everyone wants to realize, but exactly how, if you do have this existing fleet of hundreds, perhaps thousands of applications and bunches of teams and organizational silos, like how do you do this in a sane way? I think that we definitely want to be part of the tools and processes that kind of let you achieve those benefits, but without going back to some sort of Wild West where you have no idea what's running anywhere and you can't recreate any of it. So finally is, as we talked about application orchestration, we drew it this way, that there's core stuff and there's application stuff and then there's the application itself. So it's sort of a moving up the stack sort of thing. We also think about moving laterally, which is like the network and storage devices, and you probably heard quite a bit about that this week as well, that we're really expanding Puppet's capabilities to manage those devices. We talked a lot about not really needing agents anymore, that like Amazon S3 is a thing that we could manage, that it doesn't really matter that it's not even really a computer in the way that like a switch or storage device is. So we're continue to invest in that to bring in management of those things that all ultimately compose your applications, because that's what your business really cares about. So how are we planning to deliver this? This is kind of the path that we've been on for a while. About 3 or 4 releases per year. Here's some of the kind of the specific things that we think are going to be landing in the very near future. Obviously, we talked about application orchestration. That's coming very soon in the next PE release. There's a lot of role-based access control, and that sort of I can run things in my own name from my laptop improvements. Code management. If you're familiar with Art&K, that's baked into PE, and we're kind of completing the rest of a code management workflow in PE in the upcoming release with the code manager service. Deepak talked about direct Puppet, which is about change, controlling when you make change, and also ultimately allowing the Puppet master to do a lot less work. I talked about the importance of high availability. That's an extremely high priority for us. Classification and data management. I talked about that sort of like self-service configuration management. We really want to make that very easy for your kind of like core Puppet practitioner, broad infrastructure sysadmins, that they can work very fast and very easily, and yet you also have the power to kind of safely delegate, like to let the DBAs go and tune variables on the database, perhaps in a UI. And finally is the query capabilities that we know an immense amount of information about your infrastructure. We want to make it super, super easy for you to get the answer to any question that you want from the information that we have. So this is kind of like the end of our presentation, but we want to stay in touch with you all the time. And I'm really happy that I'm looking out and there's a lot of people that I've talked to in the past, and we want to talk to all of you in the future. We want you to stay in touch. We want you to feel very free to reach out to us. And the ways you can do that, there's our email addresses. We're pretty easy to find if you want to email us, but you should be able to bend the ear of your account rep or your technical solutions engineer at any time. And if you have questions about area A, B, and C, they'll route you to the right person on our team. It might be me, it might be somebody else. And then finally, I would kind of also recommend that you join the Puppet test pilots. Is anybody a test pilot? Anybody? Oh yeah, good job. Puppet test pilots is run by our user experience and research team, and how we can make good solutions is we have some ideas, we think we know what we're doing, and we make a prototype or whatever, and we'll put it in front of people. We're thinking about, is this problem important to you? Or out of these 2 problems, which one is important? Or here's a screen, can you achieve this goal? It's a great way for you to directly affect what we do and make sure that we reflect your actual needs as a practitioner and as a customer. So I also urge you to join the Puppet Test Pilots program, and they give you spiffy t-shirts, and sometimes you get Amazon gift cards, and that's pretty cool too. So, are there any questions?
When we ran through this, we were worried we wouldn't finish in time, so it's great we have all this time for questions. So I see a hand up in the second row.
Let me give you the mic.
Yeah. And we have a couple other people lurking in the audience, or Deepak, we can all chime in.
So as a PE customer, what's the best way or ways to request like feature enhancements? Like I have we have some enhancements we'd like to the vSphere module, for example.
Okay.
And we've given feedback on the user lists. I don't know if a support ticket is a great way.
Yes.
Because a support ticket's like for a problem, not for a feature request.
No, support tickets are for feature requests as well. So
Okay.
that is actually the best way to get it routed to us is through support. And it's a big part of the value of what you get out of support is the ability to tell them both bugs and also, hey, it would be great if it did this. Because then they can actually go into our internal systems and they can see hey, there's another request that looks exactly alike. Let's put this other customer's name on it and make sure that they know it's important.
Yeah, because sometimes we approach it through GitHub issues as well, but I think that
Sure.
doesn't really, they don't know us from an open source
Yeah,
user.
yeah.
So.
The request that I would make to kind of turn it around is if you're at that point, I think I need a new feature, phrase it in the form of your problem. I am trying to do
Tell us
blank
why.
because of blank and I can't. And I'm sure if you're a developer, you've gotten a really terrible bug report and you're like, I have no idea what's going on here. So we can kind of get the same, we can be in the same position where I need a button that does
Right.
this. Why?
Right.
Why does it have to be a button? Why does it need to do that?
Yeah.
If you're able to frame that as your problem and describe what your situation is, and what the impact is, it's vastly easier
Yeah.
for us to act on that.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
why it's important.
Yeah. Or the other classic is, these are the 18 things that are important to me. Numbers 4 and 9 are the most important, and then the rest are just,
Yeah.
it's just going to be a jumble.
Okay. Any other questions? I think people have seen too many roadmap presentations this week. Maybe you've gotten everything answered.
Apologize for the number of bullets.
Questions?
Going
Deepak,
once.
do you have any questions?
I'm good.
Okay.
Would you like to make any feature requests at this
Yeah,
point?
there you go. Now's your
Right.
chance.
Well, thanks.
We should give out one free feature request.
I know, really.
Maybe do that. Thank you.
Thank you.